Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Future Focused Learning podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and education and strive to answer the big question: how do we prepare students for the future? I'm your host, Kyla Bolden, founder and CEO of Wiz Kid Learning. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations with educators, industry leaders, and changemakers who are transforming learning environments and equipping students with the skills they need to thrive in an ever evolving world. Today, we have a very special guest on the podcast, Antoinette. She has been a Wiz Kid Learning instructor for about 3 years now, and she has taught a ton of classes from artificial intelligence, intro to game design, Python classes. The list goes on and on. And I wanted to have her on to show you guys the types of instructors that we have at WizKid, but also showcase what she has studied in school and then also what she's going on to do. Because the cool thing about Antoinette is not only did she study computer science in school, but she is actually going on to be an IoT engineer. And one of the things that we really try to do at WizKid is make sure that our instructors are not just imparting knowledge on our students, but are also living the type of life that we want them to be able to actually execute in the future from learning tech skills at a young age. So Antoinette is a perfect example of that. In this conversation, we talk about Antoinette's childhood, her first introduction to the world of tech and learning to code, and she gives some advice for individuals who are looking to break into the tech world when it comes to what they should study, as well as some things that they may need to do on their free time to help them develop that innovators mindset, that technical mindset outside of the classroom. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I know I enjoyed having Antoinette on. She has been such an amazing instructor for WizKid Learning, and I can't wait for you guys to hear more about it. So today we have Antoinette joining us on the podcast. Antoinette is actually a former WizKid Learning instructor. You have been with us for how many years, actually?
Coming up on 3 years.
3 years, which it has been incredible to work with her. She teaches our coding classes, our Rosebox classes. The list goes on and on. And actually, she's going on to do some other incredible things in her career. So I thought she would be the perfect person to talk to about how we could potentially positively educate our students and prepare them for the future. So thank you so much, Antoinette, for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, as I said before, Antoinette is actually a WizKid Learning instructor. And so she studied, what did she study again in school?
So in university, for my undergrad degree, I studied computer science and data science. So that degree was actually done through the University of London, UK,
Hmm.
and it was through a distance learning program. So I actually studied online at home here in Canada.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. So she studied computer science in university. And so obviously she probably had an interest with tech for a while. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about how you first became interested in technology?
Sure. So I would say my tech journey started off at a really young age, probably around 5 or 6.
Mhm.
I was always interested in technology. So for example, like was always like fascinated playing around with my parents' flip phones from way back in the day. And just kind of understanding how they worked, why one button would do this different function and a different button would do another function. So in terms of technology, it's always really been a key part of my life, playing video game consoles to troubleshooting with the internet equipment inside the house, and then also reading like sci-fi novels.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I always think that, our interests when we are children really oftentimes do dictate what our passions are, and the careers that we actually go into if we actually do have the opportunity to pursue them later on. So when I was a kid, I was also really interested in technology. I loved video games. I loved building websites, and it's kind of interesting to see, what we do now compared to what
Right.
we were interested as a kid. And so,
Right.
since you were already had an affinity for technology at a young age, was there any way that you could further like pursue that interest as a student before university, or was university the first time you did that?
I've definitely pursued it before university. So through my adolescence, I still had an interest in technology. But also I would say more so the kind of structural component of technology. So the engineering aspect, how you put components together for the tech to actually work. So when I entered high school, I had in mind for post graduate studies to go into engineering. I wanted to kind of go into like the robotics sector of engineering. However, in grade 10, in one of my courses, elective courses, I took a computer science course and also a technical design course. So the computer science course, of course, would be like programming languages, and then the tech design course was more so the architectural design, if you think of it like that. So using software to kind of draw up schemas for building plans, and then actually building those schemas by hand using cardboard or other materials. So when I got into grade 10 and I did those two courses, I was kind of at like a fork in the road, so to speak, because I had my love for computer science, learning programming languages. The first one I learned actually was Java. It was super cool, super engaging, and fell in love with programming right there and then. But then there was the technical design course where I could still use technology and also like using hands on, I guess, so to speak, methods, like sort of the engineering aspects. So I was at a fork in the road. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I eventually landed on computer science. So then I took that course again after in grade 10. I took it again in grade 11 and in grade 12. And then that kind of helped me learn like foundational programming skills. And not only just for programming, but also just kind of like thinking skills, problem solving skills definitely kind of opened up a lot more taking these computer science courses. So that's where I would say I definitely got a chance to kind of implement my curiosity for technology and then build my knowledge from there before I got into university.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up thinking skills, critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, because I think that's often left out when talking about why you should try to learn how to code or try to learn these technical skills.
Right.
What because with like the commercialization of AI and all
Mhm.
of these things, oftentimes people are like, well, AI is going to be building these tools and AI is going to be coding for us, etc. Which I totally understand that sentiment. And I think one of the biggest benefits of actually learning these technical skills is the problem solving, the thinking skills. I always say the kid that's really good at math tends to be able to write a decent essay too. And it's not because they're quote unquote smarter across the board.
Mhm.
It's often because they've just learned how to think in a process and logical
Exactly.
format. And
Mhm.
everything boils down to that in general. If you're able to problem solve, you're able to, understand and write an essay better. You're able to do a lot of things across life a lot better. And I
Yeah.
think coding and these technical skills that you've learned as a teenager and then you went on to university, et cetera, and now you're in career really honed in those critical thinking skills that are super, super transferable. Did you think back in high school, and probably not because you were a lot younger, but now looking back on it, learning these technical skills helped in other areas in your life or other subjects?
Definitely. I would say it made me think more about processes, if that makes sense. So understanding kind of like as we call it, the butterfly effect, how one instance can then propagate itself and affect something else down the road. So to get more, I could detail on that. When it came to conditional statements, like if statements, if then statements, it's and thus, if then else statements, or like while statements, kind of understanding how they worked. And I guess that kind of leads into, um, what would you call it? Um, it's in philosophy, logic statements, so logical
Mm.
operators. It kind of led into more so the logic statements and operators in my head. And it helped me understand kind of how to go about life in a way. So, for
Absolutely.
example, it comes with like, if I'm stressed out about something, I'm always thinking about, okay, how can I modify it? So, if, for example, I'm stressed out, then do something that will then help me to become less stressed and then continue with the task that I was doing that made me feel stressed out in the first place. But it doesn't also just apply to myself. It kind of just applies to everyday life and kind of just understanding how things work. So, for example, And video games. I love video games. I was once playing a video game, and this is during while I was in high school, and it occurred to me like, oh, this is how they made the sequence of events in the video game. They did a lot of if else statements, probably nested if else statements, because I'm looking at how the character is playing and the options they make, and then how that affects their gameplay further down the line. I'm like, oh, that's probably how they did it. So it really helped me kind of understand, I guess, like the back end of systems and how they work and how that also applies to life. Um, so yeah, I think that's what I would say is how it kind of helped me out a bit.
Oh, I love that. And you could really apply that across the board. I loved how you applied it to like, if I'm feeling stressed out and I'm just thinking about like, I do that all the time. Like, if I'm like, oh, I'm feeling stressed out, and then I'm trying to think, okay, why am I feeling that? Is it something that happened? Is it because I drank 6 cups of coffee that day? Is it because I'm
Mhm.
tired? And then you're like, okay, then how can I fix this? So it really
Right.
makes you think logically across the board. And I think being in problem solving mode as much as possible in life is really important rather than, just being like, this broke, I can't do anything about it, which could,
Exactly.
often is something that happens. I think
Right.
something that coding and like the technical skills that you have learned have probably helped you a lot with as well is resilience. We say in
Yeah.
the class, like at Wiz Kid Learning, and I'm sure this has happened to you in class as you've taught a Wiz Kid Learning class, that when something breaks, sometimes you don't know why. And sometimes you can do everything right and it still breaks, right? And so you have to try again. And I used to think when I was younger that sports was like the best way to build that resilience. But now I definitely see it in education, especially when it comes to tech education, because you
Mhm.
could do everything right and it could still not work, right? And you have to try it
Exactly.
again and you have to try it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And I see that, and you probably had experiences like that in the WizKid Learning classroom where, you
Definitely.
teach a student something and it doesn't work. And yeah, tell us a little bit about like, your experience as a WizKid Learning instructor and how that's been.
Yeah. So I would say as a WizKid learning instructor, for starters, I had a great experience working with
Mhm.
WizKid. As an instructor, I definitely felt like I was properly trained to do the job to teach students back in the beginning when I just started. And I did always feel like WizKid had my best interests at heart. Definitely a company I would say that would foster growth. So I guess on the people side, with the organization, I definitely had a good experience there. And I feel like that definitely trickled down into how it affected students as well, because they say like happy wife, happy life, but also like happy instructor, happy kids, I would say, because now the instructor feels motivated to teach and do a good job, right? So overcoming challenges in the classroom, I think mostly personally for me, it was a really big thing that I honed down in the content that children were being taught. I really wanted to make sure that they thoroughly understood the content and wasn't just me talking at them and saying, okay, you do this, and then they just do it. So I would always go and explain like why we're here, why are we doing this? How will this then help our gameplay for building a game? Or how will this then affect our learning skills? For example, if we're doing a digital entrepreneurship course. So for the most part, students were always engaged and willing to learn, which was really helpful. But then it was kind of on me to how do I get the information to come across in a manner that they understand and that they'll also remember after the course finishes, maybe months or even years down the line. So I would say the challenge is mostly just kind of giving meaningful um, instruction, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that's something great that you brought up because I think throughout school, we often learn these things. Like, for instance, I think about learning, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting, but in school, I learned like all the various different like wives this king had in England, just like random things like that.
Yeah.
And you think like, okay, like, why am I learning this? As a kid, I'm like, why do I need to know like all the kings of England and like their
Mhm.
wives and etc. Now looking back on it, I'm like, okay, maybe I didn't really need to know all their wives' names and etc. But that was something I learned that helped me learn how to study, helped me with memory retention and all of those
Right.
skills that help in the future. And what we try to do at With Kid is try to make the why behind what they're doing as meaningful as possible. And I love that that was something that was in the back of your mind while you were
Mhm.
teaching students because
Mhm.
oftentimes they're learning these things and they don't know why. And I think especially in a subject that's as technical as like game design, sometimes they might do
Right.
something or you might have them do something just because you're like, okay, this will make it easier in the
Right.
future. And it might be like I won't say a desire, but you might not feel like always having to explain it to them because, of course, explaining something could be hard, but you take the
Mhm.
time to actually be like, okay, this is why we're doing this. This is why we're doing every single step helps them
Right.
better grasp the information.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely feel like asking that question why definitely probably come from my childhood because just being inquisitive and always kind of curious. As a kid, I used to ask a lot of questions because I was like, because, and I guess I kind of annoyed my parents sometimes because they'd be like, oh, for instance, like, I don't know, when you, after you're done using the bathroom, you could turn off the light. I'd be like, why?
Yeah.
And of course, they'd be like, just do as I say. But like, I want to know why. Like, why do we have to turn off the light? Like, what's harmful in keeping the light on? Like,
Mhm,
is there any repercussions to keeping the light on? Like, will
mhm.
it do something, will it affect the integrity of something in the bathroom,
Yeah,
right? Like, I don't know, I'm fine, right? But
yeah.
I definitely feel like having that curious mindset, as most children do, which is why it's a great time to teach them these
Mhm,
concepts, will definitely help them to kind of understand different theories and probabilities as well, because now they're faced with a set with the question like why, and then the amount of the amount of answers that can answer that question, it could be a
mhm,
plethora of them. Because, well, why is it that when we create this object in Roblox that we have to have a while conditional statement? Why don't
mhm,
we use an if conditional statement? Things like that. So when you start asking why and then get the subsequent explanation for it, it then helps you understand why things are being placed in a certain way or being added in a certain way or aren't being used at all. Yeah.
absolutely. And I love that focus on asking why, just because I think that also allows students to have curiosity and like fosters their sense of curiosity. And that's ultimately how we continue to learn. If being a lifelong learner is something that we try to promote at WizKid, and I think the key way of staying a lifelong learner is remaining curious, right? And having the ability to be in a classroom that fosters so much creativity is something that I think is sadly rare, because class sizes are quite big, you know? And so
Yeah.
at Wiz Kid Learning, we're able to foster that small class size, foster sometimes that even like one-on-one work, that one-on-two work, which allows students to ask those questions that are like, why?
Mm,
Why? And it helps you with like your problem solving skills and like your critical thinking skills because
definitely.
you're going down the path of why. And even if that ends up with, you know what, I don't know. Like, let me check on that. Let me do some research with that. It really
Exactly.
does foster an environment of curiosity. Because you mentioned your childhood, I want to ask you a little bit about that. So, you were interested in technology from a young age, but what would you think something that you did during your schooling before university that actually helped you get to where you are today? And maybe you could speak a little bit more about where you are today because I know you're starting an exciting new position in a field that you're really interested in. But I'm sure there's some things that you decided to do at a young age that might have helped you get to where you are now.
Sure. So I'll start with where I am now. So I'm currently 1 year post grad, my undergraduate degree, and I'm about to be starting a junior position as a systems Internet of Things engineer. So for those who don't know what that means, that basically encompasses like cloud computing, IT infrastructure, all those great stuff. So how did my childhood kind of affect where I am today? I would say some things that I did unknowingly really was reading. I was a big avid reader. I would read any type of book, mostly fictional books, but through reading, I would definitely say it helped hone perspectives. And how does perspectives help me now? I would definitely say perspectives help, especially with programming when you're troubleshooting your code and you're like, something's not working. What's not working? By being open to having different perspectives, you may have thought, oh, maybe I missed closing off a statement. That's probably what happened. But when you open yourself up to different perspectives, it allows you to take in the knowledge and perspectives of other people that can come in and help troubleshoot why your code isn't working. So, for instance, you would have maybe thought you forgot to close the end statement, but then someone else can come along and be like, oh, you didn't even set the function name properly. So it's just kind of widening your kind of viewpoint so you're not so like tunnel visioned. You kind of gather all the different perspectives of everyone else. Um, and then reading also kind of helped me put myself in other people's shoes. So how does that apply to programming? It's kind of, I would say, I kind of like immerse myself in the code, so to speak. So I bring myself to a level where I'm just understanding the rudimentary elements of the code. I want to kind of understand why the code isn't working. I'm going to kind of nitpick through the code and trying to understand from the code's point of view, well, this wasn't said properly, or you're missing something here, or maybe you're running too many iterations, something, right? Reading definitely helps a lot and also widens your vocabulary, which in turn kind of widens how you think. I always do feel like a larger kind of vocabulary or a more advanced vocabulary, I would say definitely helps you with how you'll view aspects of the different world because just like how I'm saying there's different perspectives, there's different words for everything, for every common day language. There's different words that you can use in different situations that'll help you kind of engage more with the audience that you're working with or just in your day to day life. So I would say reading definitely helped. And then I would also say just staying curious or because I feel like with curiosity, that can easily die down. You can get kind of used to, oh, something's not working. Oh, well, I'll just go get a, I'll buy a new one. I'll buy a replacement part. And for me as a child, if something wasn't working, I would always want to figure out, well, why not? What happened? Because I knew it was working before. So if it's not working now, something must have changed. What was that change? I guess having that mindset and continuing that throughout my life so far has definitely helped because with curiosity, it also helps you to not blame yourself if you kind of make a mistake, for instance, because you can do something wrong, not on purpose, but something went wrong and you're like, oh, what happened here? Why did this happen? It's always that question, why? Why did this happen? And then you kind of see, oh, this is what happened here. And then you can kind of learn to do better from that example from asking why. So if there's not a lot of introspection, it can also be self introspection, but I feel like curiosity leads to introspection. If there's not much of that, it's kind of hard for you to kind of grow as a person. And then, even if it's not a personal fault type of thing, but kind of grow your skills because you're always questioning why and looking into the problem instead of just surface level. Oh, it's not working. Moving on. Well, oh, it's not working. Digging in deeper and understanding. So I would say those couple of things from my childhood definitely helped me get to where I am today. Oh, and one more thing, always being a curious learner. So always wanting to learn. I feel like asking the question why kind of by default makes you kind of a curious learner because now you want to learn more about something you don't know. So I definitely think being a continuous learner is will definitely help or has helped me and will definitely help someone else.
Oh, wow. I absolutely love that answer. I think you already know this, but people listening might not know this. I was an English major. So I didn't actually
Right.
study computer science in university. I learned how to code when I was a lot younger. Sometimes I get, like, do you regret your English degree? Which is like not that nice of a question. But I always say no because I think like reading is such a helpful thing to do for your development, for your learning development, for your critical thinking development. I didn't even think about it from seeing very different perspectives, but absolutely, like when you're reading, you're thinking about the author's perspective, you're thinking about the
Right.
various different characters' perspective. And when we're building, or like when we built our platform at WizKid, we have to think about, okay, what about the parent user, the student user, the instructor user, the admin side, like all of those things. You have to think about different users and like how they would experience things. And if
Yeah.
I was not able to even put myself in like a parent shoe or a student
Mhm.
shoe very well, I wouldn't have been able to like help build a piece of technology that worked well for them, right? And so
Absolutely.
reading is something that really does help you gain the skill of putting yourself in other people's shoes a lot, which I think is super important in technology. And it's such a great example because you think like literature or, English reading is like the complete opposite of math and STEM, but it's not. It's really quite intertwined. I love that answer. And I would guess one of the last questions I want to ask is about students getting involved in learning technical skills from a young age.
Mhm.
Obviously, at Wiz Kid Learning, we think that's really important. That's what you've been helping us do for a number of years now. I want to hear from your perspective why you think students should actually try to learn these skills from a young age, take classes like Wiz Kid Learning. Tell me a little bit more about your perspective of that.
Sure. So I'll take this perspective starting from when I first started programming back when I
Mhm.
was in grade 10. Throughout the course, I kept having this reoccurring thought. And I thought, because I have a twin sister, by the way, so we were the same
Oh.
age at the same high
I did
school.
not know that.
Um,
But
yeah.
but but my brother, Cameron, who also works for
Mhm.
WizKid, he mentioned that like a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago, and I was like, "What are you talking about? I would know this."
Yes.
I think when we did when we did this video thing for Cartier Women's Initiative, you probably told him that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know how I
I
didn't
did
know that.
later.
Awesome.
Yeah. So she isn't as technical as I am. So she didn't take a computer science course in high school. But I had this recurring thought that, oh man, I feel like she should have taken this course. And not particularly because of the programming skills you'll gain, but so more in the critical thinking skills, the knowledge that you'll gain from something such as programming. So for those who don't program, it might be kind of hard to understand, but sometimes it's not the act itself of programming that's super important. It's the act that comes before the programming. So before you write a piece of line of code, you have to think about, okay, what am I trying to build? How will I build it out? So it's the pre-thought or the precursor to actually building the code. That's, I think, is super important because it makes you think and keep thinking. And then critical thinking skills will jump in because even as you're creating the program, you're now figuring out, oh, maybe there's a more efficient way to do this. You get new ideas as you start um, upon this task. Um, and I would also say the task itself of programming is kind of a low risk task because you can implement ideas and they can fail, but it's in an environment where it's not going to affect you like on a personal aspect on that kind of big level. It's just kind of like, oh, I tried to make a game, didn't work, but you can try again. Right. So with children, ever since I took that programming course in grade 10, I was like, I think this is pivotal and important for it. I feel like it should be a mandatory course because that was what did they call it? It wasn't a mandatory course that you had to take. It was just a course that you could take for fun,
Elective?
just to elective. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it was elective course. So I took it and I was thinking there should be a mandatory course. If not in grade 9, then maybe in grade 10, just at least one mandatory programming course just to help feed the knowledge that comes with programming. And then specifically for younger children right now and the future generations, unfortunately, when it comes to technology, because especially it's so fast paced right now, the school district and like the syllabus is a bit slow to catch up for obvious reasons. Nothing on them for that, but we need to ensure that in order to keep the children updated and to have basic understanding of technology, we too have to be on the forefront of technology so that we can have them catch up, for it, so to speak. So I would say when it comes to teaching children program languages or having them immerse in technology, I think it's beneficial. I think it's a must need. I also feel like it's the new must have skill set, so to speak. It definitely wasn't the skill set to have 20 years ago, but now as we emerge into a new kind of sociological, technological kind of industry, I think it's very important. And especially because they are introduced to technology so much younger now, we call them the iPad kids. So you'll see like toddlers on their iPads. So they're interacting with technology, but maybe not so much in the way that they understand technology or they understand how they can use it to benefit themselves. So I think we definitely need to help children with exploring technology and maybe learning code and digital literacy. And if they're not learning code, there's also different aspects of technology that they can be exposed to, such as like industrialization when it comes to technology or legal matters within tech, robotics and tech, engineering and tech. So it's not really just the computer science AI fields that they can focus on. There's also a plethora of fields because seeing that technology is so big in society right now, it's going to affect every aspect of society, you know? So there is this acronym I learned in my undergrad. It's called STEEPLE, and basically, when it comes to technology, it's something that you want to keep in mind. So, how technology will affect these different sectors of life. So, S stands for society. So, if we want to be working alongside with technology and our future generations, how is it going to affect the society? What kind of technology are we implementing, introducing to society, and how will that affect us? So we can even talk about the elections from 2016, the US elections in 2016, and how we found out due to some AI working, machine learning work, that we were getting false or fake news reports and random like fake news on like different social media platforms on Facebook and stuff. And okay, well, how were these? So the technology itself was like machine learning, just chugging up random misinformation reports and news about the election, and then that got shuffled into society. So how will that now affect society? Because if we're looking for credible news sources, but these credible news sources aren't actually so credible, they're actually fake, how will this affect the system that we're living in? And then, so that was S. And then T stands for technology. So technology itself, how will technology affect technology? It sounds weird, but basically you're kind of looking at how will the current technology that we have affect all other types of technology that we have in the world. So if we're coming out with these machine learning algorithms that can detect your face, how is that going to affect security? Maybe in like the mall, are they going to put machine learning kind of algorithms on with mall cameras to kind of detect and see if you're on a wanted list? And that even goes so far as to London, UK. I don't remember which district in London, but they do have these kind of security cameras on trucks where they have facial recognition software on it, and they're scanning people as they walk by. So as we create new technology, so new technology being machine learning, and how does it affect old technology, just like regular surveillance cameras? So how is that affecting old technology? So then E now stands for the environment. So this is more kind of like the base root. Like, how are we even sourcing the material to create this technology? Is it in an ethical and safe way for the environment, right? Like, where are we mining the aluminum or the metal for the processors that we have in our chips? There's chips and everything from phones to TVs to dishwashers to fridges. How are we mining these? Is it good for the environment? And then E, I kind of mentioned the next E, sorry, stands for ethical. What are the ethics of the technology that we're creating? So again, I can call onto the face recognition software. I mean, it's fine on your personal phone, right? It's only you who's kind of using it. But if we use it widespread in society in public spaces, is that ethical? Should people have the freedom in public spaces to not be tracked by their face, by their biometric data? So kind of things that you kind of keep in mind, things like that. And then P, politics. How is technology affecting politics? I kind of touched on it with the um, elections and how it was kind of getting rigged back in the US elections back in 2016 with the fake news reports coming out. So how will that affect politics? And then L, legal matters. How will it affect legal matters throughout society? So with that, I kind of mentioned that to also say when it comes to technology, especially with children, they should also know the ramifications of technology, and they should also think about technology in a critical view. Technology is great. I use it every day. I don't go a day without using technology, but it's also good to think about what the adverse effects of technology could be, and not to kind of be doomsaying like, oh, technology is all bad, we have to get rid of it. But if you find an issue with something that's coming out in technology, then create those subsequent mitigations for that. How do we even fix the problem before it becomes a problem? So with children being immersed in tech much more than we were when we were younger, I think it's good that for them, they understand how the technology is working. So then they can understand how it can possibly be used to work against them, but they can also understand how they can use it for themselves to help themselves out in their life and to propagate themselves in their future. So I feel like I know my answer was very long-winded, but
It was
because tech is such a
excellent.
massive, massive industry and it has so many kind of, I guess, like legs in all these different sectors of life and how it's sorry, continuously around us, it's important for younger generations to not just get a piece of technology and be like, okay, yeah, this is great, and use it willy-nilly and not understand how it's working. Why is it working? Why is that, oh, you can use biometric data and it unlocks. Where is this data being stored? Things like that. So I think overall, they really do need digital literacy on a low end, on a medium end, on a high end, but just a general understanding of technology and how it can be used and harnessed. Because when you, especially for younger generations who are our future generations, when you teach them, when you give them knowledge, it'll help them later on in life. It's always the goal that we do as much as we can to teach them so that later on they can be in a better state than we were in, because we don't know what's going to happen in the year 2075. We don't know. Right. But if we give them the tools right now to the best of our ability, I mean, like in 2075 concerning technology, then by 2075, when they're older and they're maybe our ages or even older than that, they'll have a better mindset to understand what's going on in the world of technology. So things like that. It's always good to be knowledgeable. And I feel like because, which I'm kind of repeating myself, but I feel like definitely because technology is so big right now, it's kind of the new big industry, right? It's vital that they have a thorough understanding of what's going on.
That I couldn't have said it better myself. Because that acronym that you laid out really does lay out why it's super important for everyone to have a really cohesive digital literacy education, right? Because it really does affect every aspect of life. When I go in to speak at schools, I always get kids to raise their hand. Who's gone a week without using technology? A day, an hour, and oftentimes you have students raise their hand like a week, and then when I'm like, "Oh, so you didn't use this, you didn't use that." Oftentimes, most of us, unless we're sleeping, are using technology on an hourly basis, right? And to think
Exactly.
about how much it impacts your life, our brain, the way we move about this world, all of those things, and to think that only a very few people actually understand it, and then an
Mhm.
even smaller group of people actually have the skills to create it and innovate with
Mhm.
it's quite scary. So you put it so well why it's super important for them to have this type of education. And then I would even take it like a step further, which is exactly what you're talking about. If only a few types of people have the opportunity to create technology, they're actually impacting every single aspect of all of our lives. And that's why like diversity in the tech industry is super important because it comes down to perspective. Like we might have a
Yeah.
different perspective than somebody who lives 2 towns over and is in the same town just because of our different lived experiences. So it's important that we're bringing all of that to the table when thinking about digital literacy and tech education. And it's important that we start this at a young age. So I absolutely loved your answer. Well, Antoinette, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It was so excellent getting to hear about your experience at Wiz Kid Learning, as well as like how you've grown into such a phenomenal person and also like how you've also learned these tech skills at a young age that's helped you get into the place where you are in your career now. So thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me here. It's definitely something I was really excited to do. So I'm glad I was able to do it. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really enjoyed getting the chance to speak with Antoinette, and I definitely want to have more WizKid Learning instructors on to give you a little glimpse into what our classes are like and the incredible people that are teaching our students. So, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can get updated on when we put out future episodes. And thanks so much for listening.